When we have it, you see it. That is the purpose of our streaming show here. Moments ago, our cameras getting an inside look into that highly anticipated sit down with President Donald Trump and the King of Jordan. Let's listen.
It's an honor to have King Abdullah with us. He's been a friend of mine for a long time, actually, long before even my first term. And we've had a great relationship. He's a great gentleman, a great leader, and does a fantastic job in his country. His son, we're lucky enough to have his handsome son with us today, so it's good to see you again. We've had some quick discussions just now, and we're going to have some longer discussions after this. And the relationship with Jordan has been very strong, has been with me, and it really has been with the country. But I think I've been closer than other presidents to Jordan and what Jordan represents. And it's an honor to have you and your son with us today. And if you'd like to say a few words, and thank you very much.
Mr. President, thank you very much for having us, and so short after your inauguration, I think just as a testament to what you said is a special relationship between our two countries and the personal relationship of friendship and trust between the two of us. Mr. President, I truly believe that with all the challenges that we have in the Middle East, that I finally see somebody that can take us across the finish line to bring stability, peace, and prosperity to all of us in the region. And it is, I think, our collective responsibility in the Middle East to continue to work with you, to support you, to achieve those lofty goals. So I'm very delighted to be here, and as you said, sir, we've got some very interesting discussions ahead of us.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, many people in the region, especially Jordan, are worried about the annexation of the West Bank. Will you give His Majesty the King guarantee that you won't allow Israel to annex the West Bank? And how are you going to
I think that's going to work out very well. That's not really what we're talking about today. I think that's something that's going to work out automatically, and it's in good shape. And we discuss it. Other people have discussed it with us and with me. That's going to work out. West Bank is going to work out very well.
Mr. President, why should the king take in the Palestinian people? He's made clear he doesn't want to.
Well, I don't know, but he may have just something to say, because we discussed just briefly. I think maybe you want to say it now, or?
Well, Mr. President, I think we have to keep in mind that there is a plan from Egypt and the Arab countries. We're being invited by Mohammed bin Salman to discussions in Riyadh. I think the point is how do we make this work in a way that is good for everybody? Right. Obviously, we have to look at the best interests of the United States, of the people in the region, especially to my people of Jordan. And we're going to have some interesting discussions today. I think one of the things that we can do right away is take 2,000 children that are either cancer children or in very ill state to Jordan as quickly as possible, and then wait for, I think, the Egyptians to present their plan on how we can work with the president to work on the Gaza challenges.
So
I want to tell you, excuse me, wait, just please. I didn't know that, what you just said, 2,000 children with cancer or other problems, and that's really a beautiful gesture. That's really good, and we appreciate it. And we'll be working on the rest with Egypt. I think you're going to see some great progress. I think with Jordan, you're going to see some great progress. 3 of us, and we'll have some others helping, and we're going to have some others at a very high level helping, and the whole thing will come. It's not a complex thing to do. And with the United States being in control of that piece of land, a fairly large piece of land, you're going to have stability in the Middle East for the first time. And the Palestinians, or the people that live now in Gaza, will be living beautifully in another location. They're going to be living safely. They're not going to be killed, murdered, and having to leave every 10 years, because I've been watching this for so many years. It's nothing but trouble. Everyone's being killed. They're being robbed. It's like living in hell. And they're going to end up having a great home, great families that don't have to get mugged and killed and beaten up and harassed by Hamas and everybody else. And I know we'll be able to work something. And what you just said about the 2,000 is fantastic. It's so beautiful. It's music to my ears. But we're going to be able to work something, and I know we'll be able to work something also with I believe, not 100%, but 99%. We're going to work out something with Egypt.
But
Mr. President, during your election campaign,
Mr. President, how is the U.S. going to own Gaza? Your White House has made clear taxpayer dollars won't be used for this. So
No,
what
we
money
won't
are you going to use to buy Gaza?
We're not going to buy anything. We're going to have it, and we're going to keep it, and we're going to make sure that there's going to be peace, and there's not going to be any problem, and nobody's going to question it, and we're going to run it very properly, and eventually we'll have economic development at a very large scale, maybe the largest scale on that site, and we'll have lots of good things built there, including hotels and office buildings and housing and other things, and we'll make that site into what it should be. And the people from Gaza who wouldn't be able to be there for years, because you're talking about just to get it and prepare it and to take care of all of the problems that currently it has, as you know, tunnels, and people are in those tunnels, and you have some good people and some bad people, and you may have hostages right now. You know, you have the hostages possibly there. They don't know where they are. And, you know, I have a Saturday deadline, and I don't think they're going to make the deadline personally. I think they want to play tough guy, but we'll see how tough they are. But it's going to be a wonderful thing. It's going to be wonderful for the Middle East. I think it'll turn the Middle East. I think you're going to have peace in the Middle East. You're going to eventually have peace in the Middle East.
Couldn't this deadline risk undermining the talks that you're having with the King today, and risk the kind of wider peace that you're trying to?
Because that's not. We're not talking about a big situation. We're talking about something that can go very quickly. We're talking about it's going to go quickly. It's not going to take a long time. Okay, that's not going to take a long time. You know bullies. You know what a bully is, right? You know the bully. I've always, and I found it throughout my life. A bully is the weakest person, and they're bullies. Hamas is bullies. The weakest people are bullies. You know that, right? All right, go ahead.
Mr. President, you were saying that Palestinians will live somewhere else safe. Where exactly do you want them to live?
Well, it's not where I want them to live. It's going to be where we ultimately choose as a group. And I believe we'll have a parcel of land in Jordan. I believe we'll have a parcel of land in Egypt. We may have someplace else. But I think when we finish our talks, we'll have a place where they're going to live very happily and very safely. And, you know, don't forget, they only want to be on the Gaza Strip because they don't know anything else. They've never had an alternative. And they don't want to be on the Gaza Strip, but they have no choice. They have to be. And they're being killed there at levels that nobody's ever seen. No place in the world is as dangerous as the Gaza Strip. They don't want to be there. They have no alternative. When they have an alternative, not one person will want to stay where they are. Nobody wants to stay there. They're living in hell. It's a death trap.
Mr. President, how do you know that the Palestinians don't want to leave their land? Some people say this is ethnic cleansing. You won't be able to force them to leave their land.
We're moving them to a beautiful location where they have new homes, where they can live safely, where they'll have doctors and medical and all of those things, and I think it's going to be great. Yeah, any questions?
King Abdullah, what do you think about the U.S. taking over the Gaza Strip? Do you want to see the U.S. own the Gaza Strip?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, the President is looking at Egypt coming to present their plan. As I said, we will be in Saudi Arabia to discuss how we can work with the President and with the United States. So I think let's wait until the Egyptians can come and present it to the President and not get ahead of ourselves.
And is there a parcel of land in Jordan that you're willing to have Palestinians?
Well, I think what we said, I have to look at the best interests of my country. I think the President is very happy that we do this thing with 2,000 children as quickly as possible. And again, I believe that the President is looking forward to getting a group of us Arabs here to discuss the overall plan.
And last question, the 2,000 children, are those from the Gaza Strip?
Absolutely, from the Gaza Strip.
Are you willing to change your mind, Mr.
That's
President?
from the Gaza Strip, the 2,000.
Are you willing to change your mind if you hear the Egyptian and the Arab plan end of the month? If they present you something different, are you open to
I
other
think
plans?
we sort of have gone down the line. We know pretty much what is going to be presented. And I think it's going to be something that's going to be magnificent for the Palestinians. They're going to be in love with it. I did very well with real estate. I can tell you about real estate. They're going to be in love with it.
But Mr. President, doesn't concern you that moving 2 million people from there?
It's a very small number of people relative to other things that have taken place over the decades and centuries. It's a very small number of people. and they're living a terrible life. Look at the way they're living now. Nobody's living like that in the entire world. They're living under buildings that are mostly fallen down and will continue to fall down. And they're living under. People are being killed every day. The conditions are horrible. There are no conditions anywhere in the world that are worse than the Gaza Strip right now.
But don't you have
Mr.
concern that
President,
you can destabilize Jordan and
you said all
Egypt?
hell will break out if all the hostages are not released on Saturday. What did you mean by that? And are you encouraging Netanyahu to walk away from this deal? Have you talked about this with him?
So I've looked at at the condition of people coming out of the hostage situation, and it's horrible. I looked at the before and after yesterday. 3 young men. One is dead now, as you know, the older gentleman who died, which everybody said he was alive and well. He's dead. But the 3 young men, and I looked at them from a short while ago, and I looked at them now. They're emaciated. They look like Holocaust survivors. They looked. I mean, they'll get better, but they're in rough shape. They were treated really badly, and we've heard things from them since. And I think the reason that Hamas is playing so cute is because they saw the reaction to these 3 people that came out, and the other ones. Look, the one young lady had her hand blown off practically, and they were not in great shape either. But she's missing her fingers and a big part of her hand. You know what she did? She was stopping a bullet that was aimed at her. She went like that, and it blew off her hand. Now, I think I think they want time, because I think the people that they have living are in such bad shape, because they're sending the most healthy people out, because they don't want to send the least healthy people out. And there was an uproar when they saw the people from yesterday. So these people are, so I don't want to do 2 and then we do another 2 in another week and then we do 4 in 3 weeks. No. They either have them out by Saturday at 12 o'clock or all bets are off.
Mr. President,
Mr. President, would you still consider withholding aid to those countries if they don't accept your plans to accept?
Well, I don't want to say that, because we've had such a good relationship and we're doing so well just in the short time that we've been talking. I mean, the King just made a statement. I didn't ask him to do that, about literally saving 2,000 young children from the Gaza Strip. We didn't know about that. You didn't know about that. Nobody did, except for the King and his son. I assume you told your son, right? And I just thought it was great. No, I think we'll do something. I don't have to threaten with money. We contribute a lot of money to Jordan and to Egypt, by the way, a lot, to both. But I don't have to threaten that. I think we're above that. I do believe we're above that. So.
Would you consider other countries, not Jordan and Egypt? There was talks about Indonesia, Albania, other places.
Yeah, sure, we would. And we have other countries that want to get involved. We have a lot of people that want to get involved. There's a great sense of wanting to help the Palestinians. There's a lot of good countries out there, people that rule those countries with big hearts, and this gentleman is at the top of the list.
And if they don't want to leave, how are you going to force them, Mr. President?
Oh, they're going to be great. They're going to be very happy.
Can you
Your
give us a sense,
Majesty,
Mr. President?
should we
May I-
expect that the
may I
Jordanian
ask?
response would be part of a coordinated Arab response?
The response will be from a multitude of countries, Arab, international. I know the Europeans want to step in. And again, we'll probably have to look to the help of the United States to make sure that COGAT, which is the clearing agency on the Israeli side, makes it as efficient as possible, because 2,000 kids, the best way to get to them is by helicopters and get them straight to our institutions. I also believe that quite a few countries would also probably like to take some of those kids and have them treated in their hospitals. So we hope to launch this ASAP.
Yes, and that's right. This should have been done by the Biden administration, but, you know, they didn't do anything. They didn't know what the hell they were doing. So this should have been done by the Biden administration. This should have never happened, because October 7th would have never happened. If I were president, 0 chance of happening. You wouldn't have had that whole mess where the Middle East got blown up, and you wouldn't have had Ukraine and Russia fighting. That would have never happened. And by the way, we're making good progress there, I think. I really think we're making some very good progress.
Mr. President, you said before that the U.S. would buy Gaza, and today you just said we're not going to buy Gaza.
We're not going to have to buy. We're going to have Gaza. We don't have to buy. There's nothing to buy. We will have Gaza.
What does that mean?
No reason to buy. There is nothing to buy. It's Gaza. It's a war-torn area. We're going to take it. We're going to hold it. We're going to cherish it. We're going to get it going eventually, where a lot of jobs are going to be created for the people in the Middle East. It's going to be for the people in the Middle East, but I think it can be a diamond. It can be an absolute tremendous asset for the Middle East. And you're going to have peace. It's going to bring peace in the Middle East. Gaza, the way it is right now, every 10 years you're going to have the same thing happening. I've watched it so long, all the death and destruction of Gaza. The civilization's been wiped out in Gaza. No, it's going to be a tremendous thing. It's fronting on the sea. It's going to be a great economic development job. It's going to put people to work, a lot of people to work. And those people are all going to be from the Middle East.
And just to follow up with one on that for King Abdullah, can you clarify again, sir, how do you feel about the U.S. taking Gaza, as the president said?
Well, again, this is something that we, as Arabs, will be coming to the United States with something that we're going to talk about later to discuss all these options.
And Mr. President, take it under what authority? It is sovereign territory.
Under the U.S. authority.
And Mr. President, would you seek to personally develop property in Gaza after this happens?
No, I've had a great career in real estate.
Mr. President,
you know, when you've done what I've done in the last number of years, including the 4 years that we should have been doing something else, frankly, because people see that now for sure. But when you've done what I've done, you can just do more good for people when you're president. When you're president, we can do things. This is all things that should have been done, but actually things that shouldn't have had to be done. Gaza, absolutely, it would have been so great if the Biden administration would have started this. But actually, in all fairness to them, they should have never let it happen. It did happen, and because of the fact that they let this happen, this catastrophe of October 7th, something like this becomes practical and very real, meaning the development and all of the things that I've talked about with respect to the Gaza Strip. If you didn't have the October 7th catastrophe, and it was a horrible catastrophe, then probably you wouldn't be talking about that. But the only thing I can say is this is going to bring stability and peace to the Middle East. And ultimately, when it's developed, which will be in quite a while from now.
You were just watching and hearing from President Donald Trump answering questions at the White House, along with the King of Jordan, his name being Abdullah. We want to bring Reed in here real quick, but I also want to talk about a big headline that came out of that, and that is this idea coming from King Abdullah agreeing to take in 2,000 children from Gaza who will then live in Jordan. But a lot of questions about how this will work. He also mentioned, by the way, waiting to hear what Egypt has to bring into the table here with this plan to move Palestinians out of Gaza so the United States can take over.
Will be fascinating to see what Arab nations have to say about this, not the least of which, and you just heard that, Egypt, of course, 2,000 children, which will be offered a pathway into Jordan. But the question is, what about the 2 million Palestinians who are there? So we'll pick up the ball and run it from here, Mugo. Good to be with you for now. We just heard the president answer that question about what authority America has to take control of Gaza, and he answered under U.S. authority. So let's go live to CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Weijia, you just listened to the same thing that I just listened into, and I just want to quote what he said for our viewers who may not have picked it up. We don't have to buy, we're going to have it. We're going to take it. Then the question was asked of the president, by what authority? And he said, under U.S. authority. This is something we have not heard from a sitting U.S. president I can think of in recent history or ever.
Reed, it's definitely unprecedented, this entire plan to overtake Gaza, and his reasoning for why he thinks he can do it, which is not true. Gaza is a sovereign territory. The U.S. cannot just go around the world and take control of areas that it wishes to. And so the president did not explain why he thinks he can do that. He did not explain what he meant by U.S. authority. And you, Reed, hit the nail right on the head when you were talking about what the Jordanian king offered, which was to take 2,000 sick children who have illnesses and cancer. I mean, there are 2 million people in Gaza, and the president wants Jordan and Egypt to take all of them while he redevelops this as a real estate plan. 2,000 kids versus 2 million people, that's very different. And the president seemed to suggest that he thinks Jordan and Egypt and other Arab nations would eventually be on board with taking all 2 million. But the king was very careful and very strategic in his words and saying that we have to consult with our counterparts, we have to have a broader meeting. But keep in mind, Reed, Jordan, along with those other countries, have already issued a statement to say they support a two-state Palestinian solution. They do not believe that the Palestinians should be displaced, and they will not take those Palestinians in the meantime. And so this is a really awkward conversation that we just saw play out here. And it's notable, Reed, that yesterday the president said that he would consider withholding U.S. aid from Jordan and other countries who do not comply, essentially, with what he wants, which is for them to take the displaced Palestinians. Today he changed his tune because he was sitting right next to the king, and he said, well, I don't think we'll get there. I don't think we have to. We're already making good progress. So, this is a very careful conversation that they are having in public, but I'm very curious to learn more about what they talk about in private, Reed.
Right, and it seemed when you listen to the king right there that he wanted Egypt to have more to say here. But you bring the dollars and cents conversation in. President Donald Trump was heard there saying the U.S. gives a lot of money to Egypt as well. Is that, Ouija, what we're really talking about here? The president says we're above that, we don't have to make a threat, but the threat is there in the air, that dollars could be pulled from Jordan, dollars could be pulled from Egypt. Is that really what it's going to come down to when he says under U.S. authority? Is he really meaning under U.S. threat of pulling dollars?
Well, I think, if you just listen to what the president said yesterday, Reed, yes, that is at the heart of it, because even though these countries have repeatedly and publicly said they will not take these displaced Palestinians from Gaza, President Trump has also said time and time again that he thinks they'll change their minds. So you have to wonder what political levers he has. Well, I can tell you that in 2022, the State Department agreed to a new deal with Jordan to supply $1.45 billion in aid a year. And we did just hear the king say that he has to do what's best for his country without committing to anything beyond that 2,000 children. But certainly this is an important calculation, and it gives President Trump leverage. Now, even if he found a place for 2 million Palestinians to go, there still remains so many questions, Reed, about his vision for rebuilding. And I think the central question today is, how are you going to end the war first before we even start talking about rebuilding? We know that the ceasefire deal is extremely fragile, especially since President Trump set a new deadline yesterday in saying that if all the hostages are not released by Saturday, then, quote, all hell will break loose.
Right.
Reed.
Well, and also news broke while we were inside of this experience, watching outside of the White House to see what was going on behind closed doors between the King of Jordan and President Donald Trump. Benjamin Netanyahu seemed to echo almost word for word what President Donald Trump said by way of that Saturday deadline. We have to remind our viewers, we are in phase one of what is likely, or at least thought initially to be, a two-phase ceasefire and hostage release deal. Now, Hamas has paused. They've paused in their release because they say Israel is going back on some of their promises. But how can this be seen if we're threatening a deadline on Saturday that all hell will break loose? How can this not be seen as Israel and the United States also ripping up their side of the deal today? Not Saturday, but today.
Yeah. Well, and this was the Biden administration's worst nightmare as it related to this ceasefire deal that they spent so many months brokering, Reed, and you're right that there were two phases when it came to releasing all the hostages and ending the war permanently. The third phase was supposed to be rebuilding Gaza. And there were a lot of concerns about whether the Trump administration would be able to successfully implement the ceasefire deal. Now, you may remember when all parties signed it, there was praise from President Trump. He said it was an epic deal. He said it never would have crossed over the finish line if not for his victory in November, if not for his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, who did play an instrumental role in sealing the deal. And there was high praise for the agreement. Well, I think it was really telling, Reed, that when Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the White House about a week ago, at that time, Steve Witkoff said, you know, he was asked, what if Israel just says, we're not going to end the war? What about that? And what was a really revealing bit of information was Witkoff said, well, look, the problem is they signed a deal that was not so wonderful. You know, the Trump administration had nothing to do with that deal. We did not dictate the terms. And so they were already backing off from this praise of the ceasefire agreement. I think opening a door, realizing that it might fall apart. And here we are today, Reed, to your point, it seems as though they are ready to start over, renegotiate, end the deal, whatever you want to call it, remains to be seen, unless the hostages are all released, which, as you mentioned, Hamas has already said is not going to happen. And so this, like I mentioned, is exactly why the Biden administration was so fearful that even though they were able to get it done, it wasn't going to be up to them to carry it out. And now we are seeing a very different turn of events, Reed, and we don't know what the future will be for Gaza.
Weijia Jiang, so much to keep track of, and literally history writing itself in real time. Thank you so much for that live report from the White House. Invaluable. All right, when we come back, of course, we just looked at the executive branch, but what about the legislative branch? There is reaction on Capitol Hill to what you just heard there in the White House from President Donald Trump in that meeting with the King of Jordan. Much more ahead on CBS News 24/7. Back after the break.
To achieve those lofty goals.
Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. So we are watching this very closely as we speak. President Donald Trump is meeting with the King of Jordan. Trump and King Abdullah answered a lot of questions from reporters. Let's go live to CBS News' Nicole Killian, because Nicole is going to be talking to lawmakers today about a headline that I think is jaw-dropping for so many people. Nicole, I just want to recap for our viewers who may be tuning in. Donald Trump was asked relative to how will the U.S. have the Gaza Strip. He says, we don't have to buy, we're going to have it, take it. He was asked the question, by what authority? He said, under U.S. authority. You talk to members of Congress all the time who control the purse strings. What questions do you anticipate you will hear from members of Congress today, given that headline?
Well, I'm sure many lawmakers are going to be asked to react to those comments. What we can say is that even when the president last week made those comments suggesting that the U.S. take over Gaza, it was met with some pushback here on Capitol Hill, not just from Democrats, but also from Republicans, including a top ally of the president, Lindsey Graham, who said the idea of trying to put U.S. boots on the ground would just be problematic, that this is a non-starter for many senators. So that sentiment is likely what we may encounter from some lawmakers, although on the flip side, you have people like Speaker Mike Johnson, who said that he felt that this was a good development, that this would be a bold and decisive move. However, when I pressed him last week on whether or not, yes or no, he thinks the U.S. should take over Gaza, he wouldn't answer that question directly and just said that further discussion was warranted. So again, I think we may see lawmakers try to put some distance between those comments, but I think many lawmakers may certainly welcome this move to at least move some of those sick children, which was also part of that announcement, sick children in Gaza, some 2,000 into Jordan. And worth noting that the King of Jordan is expected to be up here on Capitol Hill later today, where it's possible he too could face more questions about his exchanges with the president there at the White House.
All right, so we also know that there is that deadline that's given of Saturday, or all hell will break loose in Gaza relative to the hostage release deal. The president saying he's done with the drip, drip, drip of hostages, to use his words and his terminology. Any reaction from lawmakers about that hard deadline, which now seems to be echoed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in recent hours?
Well, I think there's certainly a bit of concern. What we can tell you is that the president's Mideast envoy, Steve Witkoff, was also here on Capitol Hill just last week briefing lawmakers, and that was not long after, again, the president made those comments about a potential U.S. takeover of Gaza. You know, senators at the time said a lot of that meeting was really aimed at kind of discussing the administration's posture about the Middle East, though not specifically designed to kind of explain the president's comments, if you will. So again, this is something that certainly could raise questions for many lawmakers. I think for the most part they do want to make sure that that ceasefire deal is adhered to, particularly many Democrats, allies of President Biden, for instance, who was integral in helping to negotiate that ceasefire. I mean, by and large, most lawmakers want to see peace in the region, but how that is accomplished, again, continues to remain to be seen.
Before the headline that happened just a moment ago at the White House between the King of Jordan and President Donald Trump, Democrats were talking about Elon Musk having some access to the Department of Education records. What did Democrats have to say about that before this other big headline broke?
Yeah, well, I think just to be clear, I know the president has said that he would like for Elon Musk to review the Department of Education, review the Pentagon, as we know that this Doge team is reviewing other federal agencies. What we can tell you is that House Democrats, Congressional Democrats, by and large, are trying to draw more attention to this issue or potential possibility of eliminating the Department of Education. That is something that the president has talked about. We have had some reporting that he may be working on a potential executive order, but even if he puts forth an executive order at some point, it still requires an act of Congress to actually abolish the department. And certainly this is an issue that is gaining a lot of traction, particularly this week, because the president's nominee for Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, is going to be here on Capitol Hill on Thursday for her confirmation hearing, where this issue is likely to be a big part of that hearing. So there are some members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, who have introduced legislation to abolish the department, but beyond that, it hasn't really advanced.
Nicole Killian, live from Capitol Hill, and once again, a tall order of subjects to talk about. We appreciate the opportunity to stream with you today on CBS News 24/7. Have a good day, my friends. All right, when we come back, boys. Elon Musk, Sam Altman, a couple of AI titans in the tech world. They're trading barbs again. What they had to say and where they had to say it when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. So let's talk about those high-level lawmaker questions affecting all of our bottom lines. New policies from the Trump administration playing big in Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's twice-yearly testimony to members of Congress. So listen to senators pressing Powell over Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, gaining access to a payment system within the Treasury Department.
Is the system safe today?
I believe it is, and I will tell you, we are very strongly committed to the integrity, efficacy, resilience, and all those things of this system. And people do depend on this in a big way, and we're committed to that.
An unelected billionaire and his hacksters' dangerous attempts to access Americans' private data and the Treasury Department's systems that control $6 trillion in annual payments to millions of American citizens, including Social Security, Medicare, and tax refunds. Quickly, yes or no, has Elon Musk or members of his team, to your knowledge, attempted to access the Fed's protected data and systems? Yes or no?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
CBS News business correspondent Javier David joins us now. Javier, that did not sound like a definite yes or no. He said, I don't believe so. How do you read that?
I think at the core of this whole debate is really a simple sort of thing about vetting. Like you have given access to, or these folks have had access to very sensitive systems. You don't necessarily hand over your checkbook or your access to your bank account to just anybody. There's a lot of questions about who these guys are, what sign of power they have, the access. And everyone isn't qualified. So, and there's already reports emerging that some people have had negative things in their background. You're operating at the highest levels of government. You're dealing with trillions of dollars, and there's a whole question about whether or not they're trustworthy or capable. And I think that that's what's driving this conversation really right now.
Well, and when an elected official asked the Fed chair himself, has Elon Musk access? And the Fed chair says, I don't think so. That raises a whole lot of questions. Who is watching Elon Musk? Who's watching Elon Musk's people that he is actually working with here? What's the checks and balances on, as the lawmaker put, an unelected official?
Indeed. I mean, I think that, we talk a lot about the trust in government, transparency, but there's not a lot of transparency. And I don't have to tell you that Elon Musk is a very polarizing figure. And he's a very wealthy guy and a very influential guy. So is he doing something that I think the question is he working on behalf of the government or working on behalf of the public, or is he doing something that really just ultimately will benefit himself? And those are questions that are really unanswered, and they're percolating not just amongst sort of allies or enemies of the Trump, but even some within the GOP have made this observation as well.
Okay, so let's talk more tech. Of course, Sam Altman making headlines today after a Musk-led investor group tried to buy OpenAI, of course, ChatGPT fame. Kind of fascinating to see this here. Altman firing back after Musk's group submitted an unsolicited $97.4 billion bid to take over OpenAI. We just wanted to play that. We'll talk about it on the other side. Let's listen.
Sam, should you have taken Elon's offer?
You refused $1 billion for Elon Musk. What do you want to say to Elon Musk?
Received what from him?
Almost $100 billion, right?
The company is not for sale, neither is the mission. We're happy to buy Twitter if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, Well, Altman reiterated that message in a post on Elon Musk's X, saying he'll buy Twitter for just $9.74 billion, noticing he moved that decimal point there. So what does this fight between these two tech billionaires mean for the future of AI? Because we know the vice president of the United States is overseas. He did not sign an agreement with other nations to try to put regulations on AI. We know of hundreds of billions of dollars pledged to build AI in these United States. How do we read all of this?
Well, the only thing you really need to know about the story is Elon Musk, Sam Altman really don't like each other. They never have. They probably never will. This saga has been a decade or so in the making. The difference now is here. Look, Musk has a lot of support, including the ear of a U.S. president. He's got a lot of access to a lot of capital, and he's making a play for what is effectively a nonprofit. And this, again, goes back years, but he was once part of that. But he's a very influential guy, and both of them are going to have a lot to say about this AI arms race. The strange thing here, of course, is that President Trump has tapped Altman into this push to bolster the $500 billion Stargate federal AI initiative. It's really important that we kind of compete with China and other players abroad, but Musk kind of continues to troll his nemesis in a way that's very public, and it's taking the spotlight away from what is really a very important pivotal public-private partnership.
Well, and Elon Musk has famously said he wishes he had not been a part of helping Sam Altman get his start for OpenAI. Fascinating to watch there. Let's put that aside because there's obviously so much that we could talk about those two dueling guys. We've got to ask you about the egg shortage. Now Costco, Trader Joe's limiting how many eggs that shoppers can buy. So boil it down for us, if you will. Will breakfast lovers get any relief anytime soon, or are we just going to have to see a whole new season come up?
The short answer is no, and sadly, the Economics 101, well, maybe it's Economics 102, tells you that basically when you have a shortage of something and too many people want it, at least a couple of things have to happen. Prices will go up, that's number one, and or the entities selling them will need to ration them in order to make sure that everyone can get their fair share and avoid stockpiling. So that's what's happening with Costco and Trader Joe's. It's unfolding across stores across the country. Part of it is bird flu. A big part of it is bird flu, actually. But it's the headlines sort of help to drive this panic buying. Unfortunately, it has the opposite of the intended effect. So people see this and they're like, I better go get my eggs. And sure enough, there's not enough. So it's creating this, what I call the existential crisis. It's, sporadic shortages in some stores, a lot of stores just struggling to keep them in stock, and prices just keep going up. And unfortunately, again, there's no end in sight.
Okay, well, cancel boiled eggs from my breakfast tomorrow. Thank you so much, Javier David. It's always great to talk to you.
Thanks.
All right, so we are continuing to follow breaking news regarding Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He says that fighting will resume in the Gaza Strip unless Hamas releases its hostage. They've given a deadline of Saturday. Hamas said that they cut off the release of 3 more hostages on Saturday because Israel, they say, violated their ceasefire agreement. So think about this. Let's do some timing here. That news broke while this meeting was about to happen. President Donald Trump meeting with the King of Jordan, King Abdullah there. Mr. Trump continued to talk about his pressure on Arab nations to take in Palestinians as part of what he has promised of taking over Gaza. Let's listen in.
We will have Gaza.
What does that mean?
No reason to buy. There is nothing to buy. It's Gaza. It's a war-torn area. We're going to take it. We're going to hold it. We're going to cherish it. We're going to get it going eventually, where a lot of jobs are going to be created for the people in the Middle East. It's going to be for the people in the Middle East, but I think it could be a diamond. It could be an absolute tremendous asset for the Middle East, and you're going to have peace. It's going to bring peace in the Middle East.
So let's bring in CBS News Middle East reporter Courtney Keeley. Welcome, Courtney. Okay, so he was asked by what authority. He said by U.S. authority. But we have to keep in mind, what about the will of the Palestinian people, 2 million Palestinian people?
Absolutely. This is called the right of return, and this has been something that's been ongoing, and in the Geneva Peace Conventions of 1948, also in the UN. This has also been something that they've never gotten to in final status talks after Oslo basically crumbled in 2000 during the Second Intifada. But it's one of the main pillars of peace. Now, Palestinians, there are refugees in Lebanon that they've been through multi-generations in different wars, same as Syria, and there's 60% of the Jordanian population is Palestinian. The Palestinian problem has bedeviled the region for all this time, and many say unless this problem gets solved, there will be no prosperity or peace anywhere in the Middle East. It's the crux of everything. And the last time President Trump was president, his first term, he did go through with that Abraham Accords, which left the Palestinians out of the equation. Now with the Gaza war, now with this tenuous ceasefire, with President Trump saying that U.S. will hold this, cherish this land, and the Palestinians will be given land elsewhere, that's really a non-starter for any of the Arab states. And King Abdullah at this meeting that we just saw them sitting in the Oval Office, talking ahead of their longer discussion, tried to put this as diplomatically as possible, saying that they have a great relationship, avoiding that third rail of politics, that discussion really of Palestinians, but just basically saying and referring to that there's going to be an emergency Arab summit on February 27th. So this is all on the table. This is not going to be something that the Arab countries will allow or that they will take these Palestinians in.
Well, and if you did a word count between what President Donald Trump said and what the King of Jordan, Mr. Abdullah, had to say, you would see that the lion's share of the talking was done by President Donald Trump. When the King of Jordan was asked about this, he had one word that he kept saying over and over, and that is Egypt. How does Egypt factor into this?
Well, Egypt and Jordan both have their peace deals with Israel, and they've been critical partners and protectors of the state of Israel, while other countries have been at war. And the Iran nexus, you had the Hamas and Hezbollah nexus, and the Iranians and the Shia Crescent. So with the Egyptian Camp David Accords that established peace during President Carter, with the peace that was established between Jordan and Israel 30 years ago, and Jordan and Egypt get a lot of money and assistance from the U.S. to keep the peace, really, and also keep regional stability. So you have intelligence sharing with these leaders, the general, as President Trump referred to him the other day, General Sisi of Egypt and King Abdullah of Jordan. They also want to keep their countries from spilling over into any kind of extremist conflict themselves. So it's not just money for aid and military assistance, it's keeping their countries secure and keeping any spillover extremism from toppling their presidency or their kingdom, and also being aligned with Israel. So all of this is fragile and tenuous, but it's something that the U.S. has also said they haven't cut aid to Jordan and Egypt. President Trump is not threatening to cut aid. For instance, Jordan gets $1.6 billion in aid approximately. Egypt gets something similar. And it's a lot of, like I said, intelligence sharing. It's not just keeping the peace and stability. It's also a relationship that's critical in terms of national security for all three countries.
Well, and now the news that broke during that meeting between the king and the president, Benjamin Netanyahu, really reinforcing what President Donald Trump said, that if all hostages are not released by Saturday, all hell will break loose. So you talk about tenuous, you talk about fragile on many fronts there. Courtney Keeley, thank you so much for those thoughts. Well, when we come back, we have a bit of breaking news that was just handed to me. Russia has released a detained American teacher, Marc Fogel. That news also breaking at this hour. We'll have details on that when we come back on CBS News 24/7. When we see it, you see it, and we have breaking news to deliver on the promise of this broadcast here on CBS News 24/7. This comes from the White House. Russia has just released detained American teacher Marc Fogel. That is news out of the White House. So we have an idea of exactly how this played out, and it's interesting because it speaks to what is happening relative to talks with Russia, talks with Ukraine, and some potential deal-making here. So I just want to get into this. Steve Witkoff, who is a special envoy by President Donald Trump, just left Russian airspace with Mr. Fogel. Mr. Fogel, keep in mind, was arrested in August of 2021. He was serving a 14-year prison sentence in the Russian prison system. His family and supporters say he was traveling with medically prescribed marijuana. So Mike Walls did not say how the deal played out because it was a deal that was made. Apparently, Russia and the U.S. negotiated an exchange to ensure Fogel's release. Here's what we don't know, what that exchange meant, what the U.S. side bargained, what the Russians bargained here. But we do know the previous work of exchanges really didn't do anything. But Mr. Walls, and this is interesting and fundamental to our current time as we speak to the war between Russia and Ukraine, he said that this development with the release of American teacher Marc Fogel is, and these are his words, a sign that we are moving in the right direction to end the brutal and terrible war in Ukraine. Pretty fascinating here. Now, you are seeing Mr. Fogel's family there. They released a statement saying this has been the darkest and most painful period of our lives, but today we begin to heal. So once again, American teacher Marc Fogel has been released. He just left Russian airspace with Mr. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff. Pretty fascinating times we are in right now, and so more breaking news, a hostage release to talk about. What will this say relative to Russia's war in Ukraine? Mr. Witkoff says it seems to mean there's a little bit of softening where a deal is concerned. We'll be watching that one closely. All right, so let's talk about another headline. Meantime, President Donald Trump's mass deportation effort getting some backlash from none other than Pope Francis. In response, Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, is telling the Pope to stick to the Catholic Church. Those are Mr. Homan's words. Let's turn now to CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez. Camilo, what's the back and forth there? It's not often that we hear a head of government telling the Pope to stick to his job in the Catholic Church.
Well, Reed, Pope Francis has long been an outspoken and vocal advocate on behalf of migrants and refugees, and this week he penned a letter in which he essentially criticized the Trump administration's immigration policies. He said in that letter, Reed, that all countries have the legal right to defend their territory from criminals and others who may endanger the public safety and national security of people within that country. But he also denounced the deportation of migrants and refugees who are fleeing persecution and poverty, saying that that undermines the dignity of human beings. And so obviously border czar Tom Homan took issue with that statement by the Pope, saying that the Vatican, for example, has a fence around that perimeter in that part of Rome. And obviously he's saying that he as a Catholic should, be focusing on the Catholic Church and not on U.S. immigration policy and border initiatives. But this really does underscore that there is an escalating feud between some religious leaders, Reed, and the Trump administration over U.S. immigration policy. Just today, a group of religious leaders sued the Trump administration over a decision to rescind a Biden administration policy that prohibited ICE and CBP agents from going into churches and other so-called sensitive locations to arrest undocumented immigrants.
Well, and as we heard in the days after the inauguration, you saw one of the leaders in Washington, D.C., a faith leader, saying to President Donald Trump to have mercy. It appears that there's a direct message back to those religions who have a say in this. Camila Montoya Galvez, thank you so much for that. All right, we'll be right back on CBS News 24/7. Take a look at this. Lava meet snow. This is on Mount Etna in Italy. What you're seeing there is lava spewing, illuminating the snowy surroundings of that volcano summit. 3,300-meter high volcano is the tallest in Europe, and it's believed to have the longest documented history of eruptions, with records setting back to 425 BC. Lava meets snow, that equals steam. Pay attention in science class. You know where it's snowing right now? In our nation's capital. You are seeing that open door. Behind that door, the King of Jordan, King Abdullah, meeting with President Donald Trump. What happened there today will make world headlines by the time you sit down for dinner. Donald Trump reiterating with the King of Jordan that the U.S. will own Gaza. Donald Trump saying, "We will take it. We will have it." He was asked by what authority? He said, by U.S. authority. Obviously, a lot more details to come in how this can be accomplished, politically and otherwise, with Arab nations largely being united against this plan. Also, the headline that came out of that is that Jordan will take in 2,000 sick Palestinian children. But what of the 2 million Palestinians? Many more questions and many more answers to chase here on CBS News 24/7.